In this lesson, we're going to continue to discuss interactive. If you'd like to follow along, go under the File menu to Open, and in the Sample Files folder, scroll down to 1604, Authoring PDF Forms, and just click Open. Before we get started, I'm just going to pull the Buttons and Forms panel out and open it up. It's the only panel that I'm going to use, so I want to position it so I don't lose anything off the bottom of my movie. Why don't we zoom in a little bit closer with our zoom tool? So just click and drag across the page. And I just wanted to show you that in the interest of time, some of the text fields in the layout have already been created. You could recognize it because of the dashed line going around the graphic frame, but also there's a little icon of an I-beam over the top of a text field. Now, I used graphic frames. You could use text frames. You could use unassigned frames. It really doesn't matter. They all work. I'm going to go to the graphic frame to the right of my city listing. And how am I going to make this into a text field? Well, what type of Acrobat object do I want? What type of form object do I want? I'm going to go under my Options menu and choose Text Field. Now, all I have to do is name it. I'm going to call it City. Also, there's a description area. I'm going to call that City as well. The description, when I open my Acrobat later and I hover over the top of this particular field, a little note's going to pop up that says City. Then I have a choice of making this particular object printable, making it required. So if they don't fill it out, they can't submit it. I could make it so you need a password, make it read-only, make it multi-line in case whatever I'm typing into the field doesn't fit. It will go down to another line. And I can also make it scrollable. Why don't we go to the next graphic frame to the right of State? This, instead of making it a text field, I'm going to make it something else. I could either make it a combo box or a list box. They're just two different ways of doing kind of the same thing. They look a little bit different, but I'm going to choose a list box. I'm going to call it State. I'm also, for the description, going to name it State. Now, all I have to do is list the items that I want to be in there. What states do I want to include? Well, how about I add New York, and I hit the plus sign to add it? And how about NJ for New Jersey? And I'll hit the plus sign. How about CT for Connecticut? And I'll hit the plus. PA for Pennsylvania and hit the plus. Now, if I were to select one of these, it would be there by default when I open my Acrobat. Well, I don't want it to have a state name in there. So what I'm going to do instead is type the word choose. That way people know that they need to choose a state. And I'm just going to hit Add and select that. Because it's the selected item, it's going to be in the Acrobat by default. Now, I want to sort these various items, and you can see it made them alphabetical. Why don't we scroll a little bit further down our page and go to the next section. In this section, I want the reader to choose one. So I'm going to select all of these graphic frames at once and go to the type of form object and choose radio button. That allows them only one choice. If they choose one and then choose something else, the first one will no longer be selected. The next area are actually check marks, so you can check all that apply. If I click on this one, you could see that it is a checkbox. Let me name it and describe it down the bottom over here. We want to create our own. The only one I didn't create a checkbox for is freehand. So why don't we do that? For the type, we're going to choose checkbox. We're going to name it freehand. And we're also going to describe it as the same thing, freehand. And I want to turn it off by default. You can see right now it's checked. I'm going to click normal off. And I want a rollover state. That means when I hover over it, it's going to become a check mark. So I know, oh, I need to click on this to add a check mark, to choose that. And we have a choice of making it printable, required, which means if they don't check this particular one, they can't submit the form. But that's not what we want in this case. And why don't we go down to the last section and select all three of the boxes next to easy, not too hard, very difficult. And we're going to make this as well into a radio button. That way they have to choose just one. We're going to call this learning, and we'll describe it as learning. We have the same choices that we had last time, and we're just going to leave it as printable. And why don't we make it required too? And you can see that it says button value. You have to make a choice. That's what it's saying. Now, why don't we scroll down a little bit further, and we have some buttons down the bottom. The first button, let me select that with my selection tool, says clear. If they filled in the form and they want to start over again, they can clear out all the information that's currently in there. So why don't we go for type and choose button, and why don't we create a rollover? And the rollover, I'm just going to do an inset. So I'm going to go to FX, inner shadow to create an inset kind of look. You can see it looks like a pressed button. If yours is doing nothing, make sure to check preview. And I'm just going to use the defaults. They're fine for this. I'm going to go back to the normal state. For the action, I'm going to choose clear form. I'm going to name the button clear, and I'm going to describe it clear. That's it. Why don't we choose the print button? Here, we want the type to be button as well. And we are going to have a rollover state, so let me click on that and go to the FX pop-up and choose inner shadow again, and I'm just going to use the defaults again, and then go back to the normal state. The name is going to be print, and description is also print. And what's the action? Well, let's click down on the plus pop-up and go to print form. And there it is. Let's go to the last one. This is how they submit the form. I want them to do it by email. So I'm going to click on email, my email button, and I'm going to choose button. For action, I'm going to choose submit form. Why don't we create a rollover state? It's going to be the same appearance, so I'm going to go to inner shadow again and just click OK and go back to my normal state. I need to name my button. I'm going to call it submit. Also, the description that would pop up in a pop-up note in the Acrobat itself if I hover over the button. Now I need to add a URL. In this case, instead of a website, I'm going to do mail to, and just type an email address. And we're done with our form. To see how it worked, we'll be exporting this layout to Acrobat in an upcoming lesson.